I've been very skeptical of Donald Trump's chances at victory in 2024, but this video isn't about that. This video is to explore what a Donald Trump victory in 2024 would realistically look like, in my opinion, based on the states we're going to talk about, these 6 toss-up states that we're going to talk a lot about throughout the next year or so up until the election, because these states will decide the 2024 election and the balance of power in the White House for the next 4 years. So we're going to talk about all of these states and map them out through a Trump victory scenario from most Republican to least Republican. So we'll start in that order and we'll go throughout all these toss-up states. So we're going to get to all of that in just a second. But first, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing down below and liking this video if you enjoy. Now, I think this would be the most realistic scenario for a Trump victory. Again, people will have their own opinions. You can certainly put those down in the comments below. But we'll start off with the most obvious pick, I think, of this 6, which is North Carolina. North Carolina has not voted for a Democrat for president since Barack Obama in 2008, and it's been part of every Republican victory coalition since 1956 with Eisenhower's re-election. So no Republican has won the White House without North Carolina since 1956. So this state is fundamental to any Republican winning the White House. If we go back to the 2022 elections, for instance, Republicans were able to hold on to the Senate seat here. Ted Budd, a non-incumbent, was able to beat Sherry Beasley by around 3.5 points. And that was because of increased turnout in the rural parts of the state, better margins in the rural parts of the state. Halifax County, for instance, Budd only lost this county by around 15 points. This was a county that in 2020, Donald Trump lost by over 20. So, Budd was able to make up ground that Donald Trump wasn't even able to win in these rural parts of the state that have been trending more and more Republican. If we look at trend maps from 2016 to 2020, northeastern North Carolina, this is part of the Black Belt of the South. These areas have been trending more Republican, as has the southeastern part of the state as well. You also have to factor in that there is net migration coming in from other blue states in North Carolina. A lot of these voters are Republicans. They're moving to, the coast, the Outer Banks, places like that to retire. But you also have a lot of Democratic voters moving to places like Raleigh, Charlotte, and getting involved in the financial and technical sectors there. So you have migrants coming from blue areas, red areas, and it sort of creates the purple state or lean red state of North Carolina that we know today. Now, I think in any victory scenario, Donald Trump would win North Carolina by probably around 3 points or so, similar to what we saw back in 2016. And I think there would probably need to be a decent third-party showing for Donald Trump to win some of the other states we're going to talk about throughout this video, especially states like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, because Donald Trump won those states back in 2016 because of the fact that Hillary Clinton lost voters to third-party candidates. In other words, these third-party candidates in 2020, by and large, ended up voting for Joe Biden. Now, Hillary Clinton was about as unpopular as Joe Biden, so it's really not impossible to see a scenario where we have 4 or 5% of the national popular vote going to third-party candidates. Donald Trump only got 48% of the vote in Pennsylvania, just 47 in Michigan, 47 in Wisconsin, and about 48% in Florida, and yet he won all of these states over Hillary Clinton. Had it just been a 2-person race, I think you could have potentially seen Hillary Clinton win Pennsylvania, win Michigan, win Wisconsin, and with that, she would have won the White House. So Donald Trump, in part, won his 2016 victory because of the fact that there were other third-party candidates on the ballot, and there was a lack of enthusiasm among liberal voters that otherwise would have voted for Clinton, but sort of despised her, voted third party, or just didn't show up at all. So, North Carolina, I think Donald Trump could still win in a one-on-one match. There's already going to be third-party candidates on the ballot. We'll talk about that, of course, as the election gets closer. But North Carolina is sort of a no-brainer in this scenario. The number 2 state, I think, which would be the most likely to vote for Donald Trump out of these 6 is Wisconsin. Now, Wisconsin was the only state in the Rust Belt to give us a split verdict in terms of statewide victories for Democrats and Republicans. All the statewide races in Michigan and Pennsylvania went to Democratic candidates. Wisconsin was the only exception in the Rust Belt. Ron Johnson was able to win re-election here by just 17,000 votes, but he still won re-election. Tony Evers, the Democratic governor, by comparison, won his re-election bid by 4 points. A 5-point shift to the right in Wisconsin on the exact same ballot with the exact same voters. So there is some crossover appeal with Johnson among voters in the state. Now, whether or not Donald Trump would get that crossover support in 2024 is a different question for a different video. But if Donald Trump were to win the state of Wisconsin, I think it would be more so in the driftless and the rural parts of the state as opposed to the wow counties. You know, Donald Trump is not going to get 71% in Washington County, for example. We can go to 2020 and just take a look at the wow counties in that election. You know, Washington County was only a 68% vote share for Donald Trump. So in order for him to actually win the state, I think he would have to hold his wow margins where they are. If not, they would even probably slip further to the left, and then increase his margins overall in rural Wisconsin, because Donald Trump almost won the state of Wisconsin back in 2020. It was actually closer in this election than it was back in 2016, so it's not impossible. In fact, it's very possible that Donald Trump could win Wisconsin. Of course, in this scenario, I think he probably would, and I think he could win Wisconsin by around a point, maybe even a point and a half against Joe Biden. So we're going to put that in the tilt column there. The third most Republican state, I think, on this list is that of Georgia. Georgia is a must-win, I think, for any Republican running just with the electoral college map that we have currently. You need to win Georgia if you're going to win the presidency. The only way to avoid winning Georgia would be for the Republican candidate to win Pennsylvania and Michigan. If they win both of those, they get to 270 very narrowly, 279, but they still win nonetheless. So for any Republican to actually win the presidency, they have to win the state of Georgia. Now, in 2022, Georgia actually gave us a split verdict as well, but this time it was in favor of the Republicans. In fact, every statewide race in Georgia but the Senate race went to Republicans. Now, I think it is worth noting that the Georgia electorate, by a lot of pollsters' estimates, was about Trump +3. So this electorate voted for Donald Trump by 3 points, and they still voted for Raphael Warnock. But they voted for Brian Kemp by around 8 points. All these other Republican candidates by around 5 or 6. So Georgia was one of these states that had the best showings for Republicans out of the states that we're talking about in this scenario. Of course, obviously, besides North Carolina, Georgia was the second best state for Republicans, and I think it'd be the third most Republican state in a Trump victory scenario. I think Georgia would probably go to Donald Trump by around a point or so. I think the margin would be kept very small just because of the fact you have a lot of Democratic growth in the Atlanta suburbs. In order for Donald Trump to win here, he would have to basically stagnate the Democratic margins in Atlanta, do slightly better in the exurbs, Forsyth, Cherokee County, hold his own in North Georgia, and improve increasingly in southeastern Georgia, and sort of swing these areas back towards the Republicans, and even do better in the Black Belt counties. You know, these areas have small populations, but when you're talking about a race that'll probably be decided by less than a point, every single vote counts around the entire state. So increasing his margins in these ancestrally Democratic counties, these rural Black Belt counties, is essential to any Republican victory here. The fourth state on this list is Nevada. This is a state that Republicans have been really going after hard since 2016 because of the fact that it was just so close. In the midterms last year, we also saw a split verdict here in Nevada. We had Catherine Cortez Masto win her re-election very narrowly by less than a point, while you had Joe Lombardo unseat incumbent Democrat Steve Sisolak. Now, the victory map for Republicans here was doing better in Clark County, you know, getting 45% of the vote here at a minimum, and then improving in the rural counties and Washoe County, which is home to Reno, the second most populous county in the state. And even despite the fact, if we take a look at the Senate race, for instance, that Adam Laxalt did worse in Washoe County than Donald Trump did back in 2020. For comparison, Donald Trump only lost Washoe County by about 3 points. He actually got the statewide margin for Republicans a lot closer because he improved in Clark County. So really all Donald Trump needs to do is improve his margins in Clark County, which isn't that out of the realm of possibility considering the fact that you do have a large Latino population here. They've been trending towards the right. And the Las Vegas area in general has been trending more and more Republican since 2008 because this is one of those states where you actually have migrants coming in, internal migration of people from blue states like California that are voting Republican, that are actually making Nevada more Republican and sort of moving the opposite direction as Arizona, which is getting more Democratic. So, you know, this is a state that I think Donald Trump would probably win by, say, half a point or so. I think we're getting in that realm where we're getting increasingly closer. But that puts Donald Trump at 267, which means he would have to win either Pennsylvania or Arizona to become the next president of the United States, the 47th president, and the only president since Grover Cleveland to be reelected to a non-consecutive term. Now, the fifth state on this list I think, is Pennsylvania. And the reason I think that and why I think Pennsylvania would vote to the right of Arizona is because of the trends in Arizona. Republican candidates have had a very rough patch in Arizona because they've been running these MAGA candidates, highly controversial candidates that are scaring away voters in the Maricopa County suburbs around Phoenix that have been increasingly getting more Democratic. Now, you can honestly flip this either way. You could put Pennsylvania as 6, Arizona as 6. I personally put Arizona as 6th. I think if there was any state that Donald Trump wasn't going to win out of these 6, it would be Arizona. And I think it would be by around 2 to 3 points. I really don't see a situation where Donald Trump actually wins Arizona, even if it gets a lot closer, even if it's a tilt margin, just because of the fact that you have such a strong Democratic and anti-Trump trend in Maricopa County. You know, looking at the governor's race in Arizona, this was a race that Republicans should have won pretty easily. Katie Hobbs, on the surface, was not a very strong candidate. You know, she made a lot of missteps. She wasn't making public appearances, a lot of gaffes. She seemed like she didn't care about her race, and she still won, despite the fact that Kari Lake campaigned a lot harder, because Kari Lake was just so unpalatable to Arizona voters. And Kari Lake is a Trump Republican. She's not Donald Trump, but in every other sense, she is a Trump Republican, and she lost. Blake Masters, another sort of conservative Trump Republican, lost by 5 points to incumbent Mark Kelly. So I think this state actually has the toughest terrain for the Republican Party outside of Pennsylvania. So for the sake of this video, we're going to give Arizona to Biden. We'll give the state of Pennsylvania to Trump by less than 0.5%. Now, do I think this scenario is realistic? No, I think Donald Trump at this rate is going to lose the presidential election. We'll talk a little bit more about that in Sunday's video, which I'm planning to make about why Joe Biden is likely to win re-election and why this isn't a Republican layup in 2024. And some of the points I've talked about in previous videos, others I haven't as much, so we'll certainly get into that. But this is what I think a Trump victory scenario would look like in 2024. Realistically, Michigan still going to Joe Biden very narrowly, Arizona going to Joe Biden, but you have flips in Nevada, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. Those 4 states would put Donald Trump at 286 as opposed to Biden's 252. So anyway, that's it for today's video. Please leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. As always, again, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.